We're going to start in Kentucky with Philip Bailey. He's a reporter with the Louisville Courier-Journal. So, Philip, Washington is writing one story about Kentucky governor. You wrote the story in Kentucky about Kentucky governor. Why did Matt Bevin lose?
Well, Matt Bevin, Chuck, is a unique political character, right? I mean, he is someone who has thumbed his nose at political traditions. He didn't release his tax returns. He's called, Kentucky judges hacks when they rule against him. Certainly thumbed his nose at the media. So he is someone who is uniquely sort of unpopular because he's quarreled with his own party, including his own lieutenant governor, for quite some time. So Andy Beshear's win was not surprising to a lot of folks here in Kentucky, given how Beshear was engaged with the teachers who really, quite honestly, hate Governor Bevin, and delivered Beshear immense, massive victories, particularly in Louisville, Lexington, Democratic strongholds for the party. But also what was interesting is that Andy Beshear was able to flip certain districts. In northern Kentucky, the Cincinnati suburbs,
right,
3 counties, Boone County, Kenton County, Campbell County, was known as the Tea Party headquarters. Andy Beshear was able to flip both Campbell and Kenton County in his favor. He was able to flip places like Scott County and parts of eastern Kentucky. So that, coupled with these massive wins and margins in the central areas of Louisville, Lexington, right, the Democratic strongholds, I think really, Matt Bevin's personality and leadership style finally caught up with him.
So what did the president and the focus on impeachment in this last 10 days by Bevin, did that make it more competitive? Or was it basically he was just throwing anything? This race was always lost for Bevin, and he was looking for anything to get over the finish line here. During
the summer, the governor's campaign made it pretty clear they wanted to nationalize this race on abortion, on illegal immigration, and certainly on the president, who is still immensely popular in Kentucky, right? But for, I think, the governor, his campaign really got an early warning back in the May primary when little-known legislator by the name of Robert Goforth, a freshman, got about 40% of the vote. And Robert Goforth's campaign, Chuck, was not saying I'm more conservative than Matt Bevin or my policies are that much more conservative than his. He was making the argument that Matt Bevin isn't one of us, right? That he's this New Hampshire native, this New Englander, who's sort of rude and doesn't know Kentucky values. As one Goforth supporter told me, the governor's not someone you would invite over Meemaw's house to have potato salad. So that was really Goforth's plan, and it didn't really, you never really saw Governor Bevin kind of build a fold with former rivals on the Republican side the way Andy Beshear was doing.
Final question, because we're hearing a lot of spin out of Washington. How do you explain the Republican success below Bevin? Is this so Beshear didn't have any coattails. What are we to read into that?
Well, I think you have to realize that here in Kentucky, Governor Bevin was immensely unpopular for years, for decades, really, Chuck. Kentucky Democrats have thought that they have been inoculated from the more progressive, unpopular national party by having these off-year elections. But what we've seen is that Kentuckians, more and more ancestral Democrats, are pretty much Republicans in their voting patterns, not just at the federal level, but at the state level. And Bevin was just someone who was out of touch with Kentucky, maybe culturally more than he was policy-wise or politically. He just rubbed a whole lot of people the wrong way, and there's really not a whole lot for Democrats to be happy about. This might be the one race, Chuck, where both Democrats and Republicans seem to be both happy with the result. Senator McConnell's people are very happy. Their protege, Daniel Cameron, the first African-American elected Attorney General. Right, and they had no love lost with Governor Bevin himself. So I think this will be more of a Bevin referendum than a national one.
Philip Bailey with important perspective from Kentucky, of Kentucky, and reporting on Kentucky. Thank you, sir. Good to see you, and I'm sure we'll be checking in as that Senate race with Mr. McConnell heats up.
Thanks, Chuck.
Hello, YouTubers. If you're watching this, it means you've checked out our channel, so thank you. Now do me a favor, subscribe by clicking on that button down there. Click on any of the videos to watch the latest interviews and highlights from MTP Daily and MSNBC. You can get more Beat the Press content every morning in the First Read newsletter. If you're tired of content that you don't know anything about where it came from, you don't have to have that problem with us. NBC News, MSNBC, MTP, and the Meet the Press mindset right here for you on YouTube. Subscribe now.